someone was in Wolfe's chair, and it wasn't Wolfe. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your voices make these mysteries alive. Let's start. It wasn't the worst thing I'd ever walked into at 10 minutes past 11 on a Thursday morning, but it made the top 5 purely on gall. There was a man sitting in Nero Wolfe's chair. Let me make that clear. Not a chair in Wolfe's office. Not one of the client's seats. Not the red armchair by the wall where Inspector Kramer huffs and puffs through depositions. I mean the chair. Wolfe's chair. The high-backed, leather-cushioned, no one else's skin-should-touch-it throne, parked just right of center behind Wolfe's custom desk. The chair in which he's solved murders, dismissed millionaires, and refused to testify before 3 separate grand juries. And there this guy sat, legs crossed, hands folded, like he belonged in it. Worse, he was smiling. "You have about 15 seconds to relocate," I said from the doorway. He looked up, still smiling. Mid-40s, maybe, though I've never been great with anyone under 50. Trim suit, slate gray, pale blue shirt, top button undone. The kind of face that sells trust by the ounce to people who don't read contracts too closely. "I'm expected," he said, as if that settled the matter. "I have an appointment." "No," I replied. "You had an appointment the second you decided to impersonate Mount Wolfe. Now you have a countdown." He rose leisurely, which I hate. The leisurely ones always think they're smarter than you. "You must be Mr. Goodwin." "Guilty." "And you are." He stepped forward and offered a hand. I ignored it because I was feeling peevish and because I'd just come back from delivering orchids and didn't want greenhouse on my palm to meet arrogance on his. "Gregory Kinnell," he said. "We spoke by phone yesterday. I asked for a 10-minute consultation." I did remember the name, mostly because he'd called twice and both times insisted, without elaborating, that he had a matter of strategic interest to Mr. Wolfe's reputation. I also remembered Wolfe's response. "Pooey." Still, we'd penciled him in for noon, which made him not only rude, but prematurely rude. The worst kind. "You're 49 minutes early and 7 layers out of line," I said. "Let's go." Before I could escort him bodily toward the front hall, a voice drifted down the stairs. "Archie," who was in my chair. Wolfe never raises his voice. When he's angry, he drops it. This was low and flat, about the decibel of a snowdrift collapsing. I stepped aside and gestured grandly. "Gregory Kinnell, meet the man whose molecules you just tried on for size." Kinnell turned, smiled again, still, and inclined his head as Wolfe descended the last steps. Wolfe, of course, was in his mustard-colored house jacket, freshly pressed gray, trousers, and slippers that had more tenure in the brownstone than I did. He did not look amused. "You will leave," Wolfe said without pause. "Return at noon. Do not speak until then." Kinnell nodded, unfazed. "Of course, Mr. Wolfe. I apologize. I was curious about the angle of your desk, actually. It's different than I imagined." "Leave," Wolfe repeated. Kinnell left. Not scuttled, not stormed. Just left, as if the whole thing had gone precisely to plan. Wolfe watched him go, then crossed to the violated chair. He stood for a moment, examining it like it might have contracted something. "He has the grin of a provocateur," Wolfe muttered. "Or a fool." "Or both," I offered. He didn't respond. Just lowered himself carefully, settling in like a man reclaiming sovereign territory. "I dislike games at this hour," he added. I resisted the urge to point out he disliked games at all hours. Instead, I asked, "You still want to see him at noon?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "He is insolent, possibly clever, and not afraid of me, which suggests either grave need or the scent of blood." That got my attention. "Whose?" Wolfe closed his eyes and steepled his fingers. "That," he said, Depends on how well he plays. And just like that, the brownstone wasn't quiet anymore. I spent the next 45 minutes cleaning up Wolfe's mood with silence and strategic absence. That meant staying out of the office and sticking to my own corner of the house, which happens to include the kitchen, the hall phone, and a copy of last month's photo play I hadn't finished. I checked the orchid temperature gauges out of habit, straightened the stack of correspondence Wolfe never read, and pretended to tidy Fritz's spice rack until the man himself politely asked if I was looking for pepper or purgatory. The air in the house was still tense, though, like it hadn't quite exhaled since Gregory Kinnell had tested the leather grain of Wolfe's sacred chair. That sort of thing doesn't blow over with the breeze. Wolfe could put up with murderers, blackmailers, and columnists, but he drew the line at people who presumed to understand him, or worse, replicate him. At precisely noon, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, fully expecting Kinnell to have swapped the smile for something humbler. No such luck. Same calm eyes, same tailored coat, same, "I know something you don't" air. He carried a narrow briefcase this time, dark brown leather, and walked in like he'd memorized the layout of the hall rug. "This time," I said, "you sit there." I pointed at the client chair, the one with the worn armrests and the faint imprint of every twitchy widow and exasperated businessman who'd ever sweated through Wolfe's scrutiny. "Not there." I jabbed a thumb toward Wolfe's seat, which now held its rightful occupant like a throne reunited with its king. Kinnell offered a half bow, took his place, and opened the briefcase with a soft click. Wolfe didn't move. He rarely did when people entered. He let the silence soak them. Kinnell pulled out a single folder, slid it across the desk, and sat back. "I work for an investment advisory firm," he began. "Mid-sized, respectable. 14 analysts, 3 partners. I'm one of the partners. Until recently, I was the primary liaison to a very wealthy client, Mason L. Dunkirk." Wolfe stirred, just slightly. That name had made the rounds lately in the business columns. Retired industrialist, eccentric taste in land acquisitions, rumored to be buying up properties in 5 states for some mysterious venture that involved old textile mills and new tax codes. "I'm familiar," Wolfe said. Kinnell nodded. "Then you know he's both secretive and particular. Continue." 2 weeks ago," Kinnell said, "Mr. Dunkirk accused me of violating his privacy and sabotaging a confidential portfolio shift worth several $1 million. He claims I leaked the reallocation strategy to a competitor firm." Wolfe's eyes opened. "Did you?" "No," Kinnell said plainly. "But someone did, and they did it in a way that made it appear deliberate and personal. Dunkirk cut all contact, withdrew his funds, and sent a formal letter of complaint to our regulatory board. If they investigate and find cause, my firm could be fined, or worse, shuttered. My reputation is already stained." "You're not here to restore your name," Wolfe said after a beat. "You're here to find someone to blame. Someone else." Kinnell tilted his head. "Not quite. I'm here because the sabotage was elegant, precise. It mimicked me, my writing style, my access level, my usual phrasing and memos. Whoever did this knew how I operate, and they did it well. Too well." Wolfe let out a soft breath, barely audible. "And you presume I can identify this mimic?" "Yes. Or at least I believe you'll be intrigued enough to try." I admired the way he said it. No pleading, no wheedling, just a man betting on Wolfe's boredom threshold. "What do you gain?" Wolfe asked. Kinnell folded his hands. "If I name a culprit, accurately, I have a chance at regaining Dunkirk's trust. At the very least, I remove the cloud. And if I'm wrong, well, I burn quietly." Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He reached for the folder, flipped it open, and scanned the contents. I stepped behind him and looked over his shoulder. Inside were printouts of emails, financial reports, internal memos, and annotated transaction logs. Everything was neat, orderly, color-coded, and boring as a grey Monday, until you realized the stakes hidden between the lines. "Mr. Kinnell," Wolfe said after 5 minutes, "have you altered these in any way?" "No." "Then you are either innocent or unusually arrogant." Kinnell smiled. "I prefer efficient." Wolfe nodded toward me. "Archie." "Names?" I took out my notebook. Kinnell listed them smoothly. "Marcy Bellwood, senior analyst, specializes in currency conversion models. She and I have had disagreements about transparency." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Euphemism." Kinnell smirked. "More like philosophy. She thinks discretion is a form of strength. I think it's a liability." Next, Jonas Trent, junior partner. Recently passed over for an executive role I filled. Friendly, ambitious, smarter than he acts. I jotted it down. Claudine Vess, Kinnell continued, assistant to Mr. Dunkirk's personal secretary, had limited access to documents on paper. In reality, she was often present in meetings and she hears everything. "Is she loyal to Dunkirk or your firm?" Wolfe asked. Kinnell hesitated. "Neither. She's loyal to herself, which makes her dangerous. I like the sound of her already." "One more," Kinnell said. "Howard Thane, Information Technology Security Chief. Officially neutral. Unofficially, he controls what goes in and out of our servers. If the leak was digital, it passed under his nose, or through it." I looked at Wolfe, expecting the usual grimace at anything involving computers. Instead, he closed the folder and tapped it twice. "I will consider," he said. "You will return tomorrow at the same time. Leave the originals." Kinnell stood, buttoned his jacket, and turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, I assume you'll be in touch." "Count on it," I said. "And next time you want to impersonate a genius, try one who walks around." He laughed, a real one this time, and exited with a kind of practiced grace. I waited until the door clicked shut. "He's hiding something," I said. "Of course," Wolfe murmured. "But not, I think, the crime itself." "What then?" Wolfe leaned back. "He brought us bait. Now we must ask, what is the hook?" I pocketed my notebook and stepped toward the hallway. It looked like I had interviews to arrange, suspects to prod, and a few carefully rehearsed lies to detect. Wolfe closed his eyes again. "And Archie, start with Marcy Bellwood." "Because of the disagreement over transparency?" "No," he said, "because she is the only one he described without hesitation." He smiled faintly. "Just once." "People are most dangerous," he added, "when they think they are being described correctly." And with that, the house exhaled. The game had begun. I phoned Marcy Bellwood's office that afternoon from the front hall extension, partly because I didn't want Wolfe hearing the call and partly because I figured she'd respond better if I sounded informal and vaguely intrusive. She picked up on the second ring, voice crisp and all business. "This is Bellwood." "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." "Gregory Kinnell mentioned your name." There was a pause. "Not long, but heavy." "I see," she said. "Is Mr. Wolfe planning to sue Gregory, or just intimidate him?" "Neither. Though I admit Wolfe does have a natural gift for both." "No, I'm calling because your name came up in relation to a leak. A bad one." "I didn't leak anything." "I didn't say you did." "You implied." "I implied that you might have information, Miss Bellwood, not guilt. There's a difference. Also, I happen to be charming, so you can pretend I asked nicely." That got a faint snort. She didn't hang up, which was a start. "If you want to meet," she said, "it won't be here. Come to the Café Cantata on 75th. Quiet corner table in the back. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Done." One question. Are you the kind of person who drinks tea at a cafe or the kind who drinks black coffee and watches people over the rim? Neither, she said. I drink espresso and read footnotes. You'll spot me. She hung up. I grabbed my coat, let Fritz know I'd be out, and told Wolfe he could find me via bail bondsman if things went sideways. He waved me off without looking up from the folder Kinnell had left, which meant his mind was chewing. When Wolfe chews, he doesn't swallow until he's wrung every fiber from the thought. That could take hours, or a word from me. Café Cantata was one of those pseudo-European spots with dark wood tables, 3 languages on the menu, and waitstaff who looked like they all had backup careers in off-Broadway theater. I arrived 10 minutes early, found the back corner, and ordered a croissant I didn't want just to look human. She came in wearing a black coat and tortoise-shell glasses, hair pinned back in a loose chignon. She looked like she had a lecture prepared on the weaknesses of public discourse, and I'll admit, I liked her immediately. Her gaze was direct and her steps were precise. Not hurried, not unsure, just measured. "You're early," she said, sitting down. "I'm old-fashioned. I like to make a good impression." "Then you failed," she said, but her mouth twitched. I could see the irony working under her composure. We didn't bother with pleasantries. She pulled a small notepad from her purse and placed it between us. "Kinnell thinks I leaked the data." "I don't think he's sure what to think," I replied. "He just gave Wolfe a list. Yours was first." She nodded, as if that confirmed something. "I know why," she said. "Because I told him 3 weeks ago that Dunkirk's investment strategy was a mistake, and because I warned him that our firm was being too lax with internal protocols. He thinks I've been waiting to prove a point." "Have you?" She raised her eyebrows. "Are you always this direct?" "Only when I like the company. I didn't leak anything, Mr. Goodwin, but I did notice anomalies. And I tried to raise them with Howard Thane. He brushed me off." "Did you document any of that?" "Of course. I believe in paper trails. They keep people honest, or at least wary." I made a mental note to get a copy of whatever she'd saved. "How well do you know Jonas Trent?" She shrugged. "Better than I'd like. He's harmless on the surface. But he's watching every opportunity. If you asked him whether he wanted Kinnell's job, he'd say no, because he wants Dunkirk's." "Ambitious." "Hungry," she corrected, "and very aware of how perception creates trust. He's building narratives every time he speaks." I liked the way she talked. Like Wolfe, she framed people as puzzles, habits, motives, blind spots. What about Claudine Vess? That got a sigh. She's a chameleon. Sweet one minute, dry the next. She's loyal to whoever makes her feel safest. It used to be Kinnell, then Dunkirk. Now, I don't know. I scribbled notes, though most of it I'd already memorized. "Miss Bellwood, is there anyone at your firm who would go to this much trouble just to damage Kinnell?" She thought for a while. Long enough for the server to pass by, notice her empty hands, and retreat wisely. "Not just to damage him," she said finally, "but to replace him." "Yes. Jonas. Maybe. But it would require access to client-side communications, or someone close to Dunkirk. That narrows the field. Claudine might have had that access. So would Howard. Could Dunkirk be setting him up? "No," she said. "Dunkirk doesn't play games. If he wanted Kinnell gone, he'd say so, and he wouldn't bother leaking files. He'd send a cease and desist with a 40-page annex." I nodded. "One last thing. Has anything gone missing lately? Not big, just out of place." She looked surprised. "Yes, actually. A binder. Internal network performance summaries. Not sensitive, just data logs. I noticed it last week, but IT said they'd taken it for review. When I asked for it back, no one could tell me where it was." That fit. Wolfe had a phrase for it. Subtle trespass. Not destruction, not theft. Just the reshuffling of the deck while the magician watches the crowd. I may be in touch again, I said. She stood with me. Good. Just don't treat me like a suspect. I'm not fond of that word. I'll try to remember. What are you fond of? Evidence, she said, slipping past me. And men who don't think charm is the same as clarity. I tipped my hat and let her have the last word. It felt earned. Back at the brownstone, I filed my notes, grabbed a root beer, and reported to Wolfe, who was deep in contemplation over a jar of spice he claimed had been moved an inch to the left. She's sharp, I told him, too sharp to pull something like this alone. If she did it, it's layered. She didn't, Wolfe said. Not this. Why? Because she told you the truth, he replied. Or just enough of it to be useful. She described Trent, Vess, and Thane with precision. That requires clarity. If she were guilty, she'd obfuscate. I leaned against the door. So who? He didn't look at me. Bring me Jonas Trent, tomorrow, here. Client style? Number casual. I want to see how he acts without warning. I nodded. What about the binder? He tapped his lips. Someone rearranged documentation to suggest Kinnell was careless, he said slowly. They would also need to suppress any logs that show their own digital footprints. So we're looking at IT? He shook his head. Not yet. We're looking at misdirection and the person most comfortable crafting it. Jonas Trent. I made a note to brush up on my poker face. I had a feeling I'd need it. Getting Jonas Trent to the brownstone without tipping him off took some finesse. I called his office the next morning and led with charm, the way you'd approach a cat near an open can of tuna. Mr. Trenter Archie Goodwin here. I'm assisting Mr. Wolfe with a matter Gregory Kinnell brought to us. Nothing formal, yet. But we'd like a brief conversation. You're not under suspicion. We're just orienting ourselves. I see, he said, and I could practically hear the gears turning. Gregory mentioned Mr. Wolfe's name the other day, didn't realize it was serious. That's what everyone says until Wolfe starts quoting Latin at them. Can you drop by today? Informal setting. Think armchairs and orchids, not courtrooms and cross-examinations. He agreed, tentatively, and we set a time for noon. Not because Wolfe had a fondness for lunch guests, but because I knew Fritz could diffuse even the most defensive men with a good plate of cold roast beef and German potato salad. And Wolfe would be fresh from his orchid session, which meant his mind would be both clear and intolerant of nonsense. When the doorbell rang, I was already at the front door. Jonas Trent had the polished look of a man who knew how to dress for ambiguity. Navy suit, no tie, and a smile that walked a tightrope between humility and self-advertisement. I wasn't sure what to expect, he said as I took his coat. That's the point, I replied. Wolfe likes the edge that comes from imbalance. He followed me into the office, glancing around with a curious eye. Most people do. The place has a gravity to it. Dark paneled walls, towering bookshelves, and Wolfe seated in his throne like some combination of Roman senator and ill-tempered owl. Mr. Trent, Wolfe said without rising. Sit. Mr. Goodwin tells me you've made a reputation in your firm as a strategist. I try, Trent said, easing into the client chair. Though lately, that reputation feels a little stained by proximity. To Mr. Kinnell? Trent nodded. The Dunkirk fallout. Everyone's watching their back. Some are sharpening knives. Others are rehearsing apologies. And where do you fall? I'm in wait-and-see mode. Wolfe let that hang. It was the kind of non-answer he hated, but he didn't pounce. Instead, he gestured toward the tray on the sideboard. Fritz prepared something. Eat, if you like. Trent declined with a smile. I made a note. Wolfe doesn't trust people who turn down Fritz's food without at least pretending to be tempted. Something about it suggests a lack of self-awareness, or worse, immunity to comfort. Both dangerous. Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Kinnell, Wolfe said. Trent clasped his hands lightly in his lap. Professional, respectful, competitive. I wanted the senior liaison role with Dunkirk, yes, but Gregory had it first. I accepted that. I wasn't thrilled, but I accepted it. And did you foresee his downfall? A pause. Just long enough. Number, though, I can't say I was shocked. Gregory's smart, but he assumes immunity. That catches up with people. Were you aware of any internal leaks before the incident? No. Do you think he's guilty? Trent smiled again, tighter now. That depends on how you define guilt. Negligence? Possibly. Intent? I doubt it. But if someone wanted him removed, it wouldn't take much. Just the right nudge, at the right moment, toward the right client. And who would have the motive and access to deliver that nudge? Trent glanced at me, then back to Wolfe. If I answer that, I sound like I'm accusing someone, and I'm not. But since you asked, Howard Thane has the technical reach. Marcy Bellwood has the intellect. Claudine Vess has the ears. And you? Wolfe asked quietly. I have restraint. That wasn't a denial. It was a redirect. Wolfe noted it. So did I. Do you believe Mr. Kinnell is a danger to your firm? I believe perception is a danger, and right now Kinnell is radioactive. Wolfe leaned forward half an inch. For him, that's like a lion uncrossing its paws. Mr. Trent, were you aware that an internal binder containing network performance logs went missing last week? Now we had him. His eyebrows twitched before the rest of his face caught up. Number, that's the first I've heard. You were not informed? No. Did you authorize anyone to retrieve documents from Marcy Bellwood's workspace? Absolutely not. Would you recognize those documents if shown to you? If they were official and recent, yes. I watched Wolfe scan his face like a butcher judging the firmness of a roast. He made no move, but something in him settled. Thank you, Wolfe said. That will be all. For now. Trent stood, adjusting his cuffs. So this isn't an accusation? Not yet, Wolfe replied. Trent offered a tight nod and turned to leave. I walked him to the door, watching his shoulders, his pace, the slight way his head tilted left as if he were replaying the entire conversation for holes. He didn't say goodbye. When I returned, Wolfe was still watching the empty chair. He's too careful, he murmured, but not composed. He was surprised. By the binder. Yes, that tells us something. Someone is working around him, or framing him. Howard Thane. Or Claudine Vess, Wolfe said. Fetch her next. Why not Thane? Because Thane knows he's untouchable. Vess is more interesting. She's invisible until she isn't. I want to see how she dances. I sat down across from him. Wolfe, do you think this is just about Kinnell? Or is there something else? He tapped his fingers together. Kinnell is a lever, but someone is using it to shift more than just his weight. We must ask, what else moved? At that moment, the phone rang. I picked it up. Archie, said Gregory Kinnell's voice, tight and short of breath. We have a problem. What kind? Marcy Bellwood is missing. That got my full attention. She didn't show up to work. Her apartment doors locked. No answer. Claudine says she didn't call in, didn't email. Did she say anything to you last night? Any hint she was going somewhere? No, he said. Just that she was planning to escalate a complaint to internal oversight about Howard Thane. I scribbled that. Wolfe's here. He'll want details. Then I suggest you both act quickly, Kinnell said. Because if something's happened to her, this isn't just sabotage anymore. He hung up. I turned to Wolfe. She's missing. Wolfe's expression didn't change. Then we must accelerate. He reached for the phone. Call Saul Panzer, he said. Tell him to find Claudine Vess. Tonight, before someone else does. Saul Panzer doesn't ask questions when Wolfe calls. He asks only when, where, and how fast. That's why he's the best operative we use. The man could shadow a ghost through a blizzard and come back with a forwarding address. Wolfe told him what we knew, that Claudine Vess might be the last person to see Marcy Bellwood before she vanished, that she had ears in every office and loyalty to no one, and that something had shifted in the game board while we were still labeling the pieces. I passed the phone back to Wolfe, who hung up with a soft click. He didn't say anything for a while. Just sat, arms folded on his vast stomach, eyes closed, lips moving ever so slightly. That was Wolfe's version of field work. Meditation through memory. Reviewing every word, every look, every breath uttered in that office. I went upstairs to get a better line on Kinnell. When I reached him, his voice was flat, controlled panic in a three-piece suit. "No one's seen her since yesterday evening," he said. "She didn't log into our network after 7:42 p.m., and her keycard wasn't used this morning. No activity on her company phone since." "Did you check her apartment?" "Yes. Door locked, lights off, car in the garage. Police won't act until she's been gone 24 hours, unless we find blood or a body." "Charming." "She was tense yesterday," Kinnell continued. "She'd been working on some internal audit notes. She said she'd found something off, something she wanted to confirm before bringing it to me." "What kind of off?" "She wouldn't say, but it involved system access logs and, get this, external IP pings that weren't accounted for. That made me sit up straighter." "You think Thane's been tunneling data out?" "I don't know," Kinnell admitted. "But she did, and now she's gone." When I got back downstairs, Wolfe was reading one of his cookbooks. That's never a good sign. It means his mind is going in circles, and he's trying to distract it with sauces and cutlets. I filled him in. "She had a lead," I said, "and she was scared." "Then she told someone?" Wolfe murmured. "And that person ensured she wouldn't tell anyone else." "You think she's dead?" Wolfe opened his eyes and set the book down. "Number, not yet. But missing is always the first half of the sentence." We waited. The house felt tight with silence, like it was holding its breath. At 5:20 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Saul standing there, trench coat buttoned, hat in hand, with the expression of a man who'd gotten what he wanted but didn't enjoy the price. "She's at a hotel in Queens," he said without preamble. "Checked in under Vanessa Quinn. Room 614. I watched her through the window. She's fine. Alone. But spooked." "Did you talk to her?" "Number Y followed her from the grocery store. She's in hiding, watching every step. She knew she was being watched." "By you?" "Number by whoever spooked her in the first place." Wolfe had come to the threshold of the office, not quite joining us. Just listening. "She hasn't contacted anyone from the firm," Saul continued. "But she did buy a burner phone. I got the number off the receipt. Want it?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will place the call." I took the number and stepped into the dining room. Called. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was tense, wary. "Claudine, it's Archie Goodwin. You're safe. But you've made yourself a target by running." Silence. Then, "How did you find me?" "Wolfe found you. That's what he does. What we need now is for you to tell us why you disappeared." "I saw something," she said after a moment. "On the network. But not directly. I'm not tech-savvy. I noticed logs disappearing, replaced with edits. Someone was erasing breadcrumbs." "Erasing what kind of breadcrumbs?" "Remote access. From inside our network, but timed during off hours. Coordinated. Like someone rehearsed it." "You told Marcy?" "I showed her. She said she'd talk to Gregory in the morning. Then she went silent. I got scared. I lowered my voice. Claudine, do you think Marcy's dead? I think someone wanted her not to speak. Same with me. Do you know who? She paused, and I could hear her breathing. Now, shallow and fast. I think it's Thane, she whispered. But I also think he's not alone. I walked back to Wolfe, who had taken his seat and was polishing his reading glasses. That meant gears were turning. She suspects Thane and someone helping him, I reported. Did she mention specifics? Network logs, edits, digital tunnels. You know, your favorite bedtime story. Wolfe grunted. I want her here, he said. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Tell her it's the safest place she can be. I called her back. It took convincing, but she agreed. On one condition. No one else at the firm can know, she said. If Thane suspects I'm cooperating. He won't, I said, because by the time he figures it out, Wolfe will already be closing the trap. The line went dead. The next morning arrived grey and reluctant. Fritz had a breakfast tray ready, but Wolfe barely touched it. At exactly 8:57 a.m., Claudine Vess arrived. Same grey coat as before, but no makeup, no smile. She looked smaller, like fear had taken inches off her height. I brought her into the office. She glanced around like someone surveying a theater for escape routes. Wolfe didn't offer a greeting. You're safe here, he said simply. Speak plainly. I have screenshots, she said. Printouts. Proof that files were altered. That someone used admin access to rewrite internal timestamps. And I think Marcy had the original logs. That's why she was targeted. Wolfe reached forward. She handed him a file. Mr. Goodwin will review these. I sat and started reading. Even to my untrained eye, the inconsistencies popped out. Logins at odd hours, overwritten cache histories, file names that had no business being accessed by a liaison assistant, and each one connected to a single admin profile. Who does this belong to? I asked. She didn't answer. Wolfe did. Jonas Trent. She looked up in shock. How did you... Because Mr. Trent, despite his polish, was unnerved by a binder he didn't know existed, because he declined Fritz's food, and because he told me he has restraint, which is precisely what someone says when they've been restraining their guilt all week. She swallowed. He's been working with Thane, she admitted. I think Thane handled the digital side. Trent managed the perception. Managed? I asked. Fed rumors, directed suspicion, made Kinnell look volatile. Wolfe tapped the folder. That will do, he said. Archie, invite Mr. Trent and Mr. Thane here. Noon sharp. Tell them Claudine will be present. You think they'll show? They'll show, Wolfe said, because they believe they've won. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Let us see how well they bluff when dealt the wrong hand. At 11:50 a.m., Wolfe's office felt like the backstage of a production no one knew they were in. Claudine Vess sat quietly in the red chair against the far wall, legs crossed tightly, hands folded like she was trying not to shake. Wolfe hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. He sat completely still behind his desk, eyes closed, looking less like a man waiting for guests and more like a statue being dreamed by the room itself. I had laid out the copies of Claudine's screenshots on the table beside the couch, rearranged just enough to highlight the patterns Wolfe wanted exposed, the altered log entries, the access timestamps, and most damning of all, the folder with Jonas Trent's name in the metadata, backdated, edited from Thane's network segment. It was neat. Too neat, Wolfe said, like it had been cleaned after it had been dirtied. The doorbell rang at 11:57. I let in Thane first. He arrived alone, as expected. No coat, no briefcase. Just a phone in his hand, and the vaguely annoyed expression of a man who'd been pulled away from something more important than justice. Mr. Wolfe, he said upon entering the office. I assume this is about Gregory. Again. Sit, Wolfe said, not opening his eyes. Thane blinked at Claudine, then turned back to me. Is she part of this? She's part of the room, I said. Same as you. He sat. 2 minutes later, Jonas Trent arrived. Coat folded over one arm, charm engaged, smile polished. But he faltered just a breath when he saw Claudine. It was tiny. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I was looking for it. Everyone's here, I said, closing the door behind him. Shall we? Wolfe opened his eyes. There has been a crime, he said flatly. Not a murder, though it came close. Not a theft in the ordinary sense, but a deception, a calculated act meant to ruin a man's career, perhaps even his life. And while the law has not yet been consulted, it may well be invoked by the time we finish. Thane leaned back. If this is going to be a lecture, you will be silent, Wolfe said, not raising his voice, or you will leave. But know this, if you leave, I will call the police immediately, and you will no longer be a participant. You will be a subject. That shut him up. Wolfe gestured toward me. I began distributing copies of the documents. Clauses 1 through 4, I said, detail internal access logs from your firm's private servers. These show login activity from an admin-level profile assigned to your security division. That's you, Mr. Thane. The timestamps indicate access during off hours, including multiple entries between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. That proves nothing, Thane said, flipping the papers. I run diagnostics at night, automated backups, scheduled indexing. Clauses 5 through 7, I continued, handing over another set, show edits made to client file folders, specifically ones connected to Mr. Kinnell's portfolio recommendations to Dunkirk. Wolfe leaned forward. They were altered, Mr. Thane. Fabricated. With enough authenticity to frame Kinnell for leaking strategy documents, but that work required 2 things: system access and knowledge of what Kinnell's proposals looked like. He turned to Jonas. And that came from you. Trent laughed. It was smooth, soft, and too perfectly timed. I'm sorry, Mr. Wolfe. You're suggesting I collaborated in a cybercrime? No, Wolfe said. I'm telling you that you collaborated in one. Trent raised his hands. That's absurd. Why would I risk everything for this, to hurt Gregory? I could have simply let him implode. He was already fraying. Because hurting him wasn't the goal, Wolfe replied. Replacing him was. Claudine spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but direct. I showed Marcy the access logs, she said. She confirmed something was off. The timestamps didn't match the security badges, and the documents had metadata tied to your internal drafts, Jonas. Ones you keep in your private folder where no one else can touch them. Trent's mouth opened, closed, then turned into a snare. You broke into my folder? No, she said. You shared a file once. Forgot to revoke access. I watched the edits in real time. Thane sat very still. I watched his eyes. Not on Claudine. On Jonas. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Mr. Thane, when you allowed Mr. Trent access to the security shell, what did he promise you? Thane blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Then allow me to explain. Trent approached you weeks ago when Dunkirk's tension with Kinnell escalated. He had motive. He wanted the liaison role. He needed means, your help. In return, he promised you elevation, greater authority, perhaps a seat at the partner table. I glanced at Trent. His face was pale now, the smile cracked around the edges. Wolfe continued, relentless. Thane gave you the back door. You staged the edits, planted the signs of a leak, and then pulled back, just enough to avoid detection. But Claudine found the trace. Marcy confirmed it. And once you knew she had, she vanished. Trent stood up abruptly. You can't prove any of this. Wolfe didn't move. We already have. He pointed at the final folder, the one with the screenshots Claudine had risked her job to collect. I will give you a choice, Mr. Trent, Wolfe said. Admit your role, Exonerate Mr. Kinnell and accept the consequences, or I notify the authorities, and you will face charges of digital fraud, conspiracy, and professional sabotage. Thane stood now too. I didn't touch anything. I ran the scripts he gave me. That's all. Oh, you'll get your own hearing, I said. Don't worry. Jonas Trent's expression twisted. Not into anger, into calculation. He wasn't a man built for explosions. He was built for redirection. But this time, the room gave him nowhere to point. I'll cooperate, he said finally, voice low. But I want immunity. That, Wolfe said, is no longer my concern. We let them leave separately, both silent, both destroyed. After the door clicked shut behind the last of them, Wolfe slumped back in his chair. Disgusting, he muttered, but effective. I dislike false competence. It wastes time, which you hate. He closed his eyes again. Prepare a summary for Mr. Kinnell. He may yet salvage his career. And Claudine? Wolfe opened one eye. She may have saved it. I turned to go, but he called out, voice almost a whisper. Archie. Yeah? Bring me beer. I have swallowed too much human duplicity. I require yeast and serenity. That I could do. By the time I brought Wolfe his beer, sweating bottle, clean glass, German label, he was already back to his usual shape. Heavy-lidded, still as a boulder, face turned just slightly toward the afternoon light filtering through the orchids. He didn't thank me, but he took the glass, swirled the foam, and sipped like a priest performing ritual. That meant the storm had passed. At least inside the brownstone, but outside, the weather was just getting started. I left him to his fermentation and went to my office to call Gregory Kinnell. When he answered, he sounded half expectant, half dreadful. That tone people get when they know the verdict's about to land but don't know if it's going to be a sentence or a pardon. You might want to sit down, I said. I already am. Then pour yourself something. Wolfe wrapped it. Trent's the architect, Thane's the tool, and Claudine's the one who saw them both with the blueprints in hand. I heard a slow exhale. So it's real. Everything I feared. More than real, it was elegant, personal, almost invisible. You weren't just being sabotaged, Gregory. You were being replaced, step by step, memo by memo. You should read some of the forgeries. They even mimicked your sentence structure. Scary good. He was quiet for a beat. Then, and Marcy. Still missing. Claudine's safe. We've got her under wraps, but she'll need backing if she's going to testify, professionally or otherwise. I'll make sure of it, he said. I owe her that much. You owe her more than that, I said. She stuck her neck out when everyone else was hiding under desks. Will I see a report? You'll get Wolfe's summary by courier. It's thorough. I recommend reading it with a stiff drink. Do I get a second chance? That, I said, is above my pay grade. I hung up and made a mental note to call Saul, just to keep an eye on Marcy Bellwood's disappearance. Wolfe had said not yet dead, and when Wolfe made predictions like that, he was usually right, but usually doesn't mean always. And something about her silence still itched. Back in the office, Wolfe had finally moved. He'd shifted the glass 2 inches and opened the brown envelope Claudine had left behind. A final copy of the access logs, time-stamped, notarized, airtight. I could see the structure of it from across the room. 3 layers of entry, 2 false exits, 1 final act of erasure that turned out to be the giveaway. It was the deletion that revealed him, Wolfe murmured, more to himself than to me. Always the deletion. A lie wants to vanish too cleanly. I'm going to put that on a mug. He frowned, then reached for his Mont Blanc and jotted something into his ledger. I knew better than to interrupt. By 5:30, the house had gone still again. The phone didn't ring. Fritz began prepping for dinner. Pheasant tonight, something buttery and indulgent. Wolfe was pretending not to anticipate it. Then the knock came. Not the bell. The knock, 3 deliberate raps, not casual, not frantic, just decided. I opened the door. Marcy Bellwood stood there, pale, lips tight, coat streaked with wind and rain. And in her hand, of all things, was a flash drive, sealed in a small plastic evidence bag. "I figured if I came to the police I'd disappear again," she said. "So I came here." I let her in. When she stepped into the office, Wolfe blinked once. Surprise, restrained, but not hidden. He gestured for the red chair. She sat. She looked thinner than before, like the last few days had siphoned her reserves. "I didn't run," she said. "They took me, held me, just long enough to scare me, just long enough for someone to make sure I'd stay silent, but I didn't." "Who took you?" Wolfe asked, not unkindly. "I don't know. They never used names. 2 men. Clean, corporate. They left me in a storage unit. No harm, just cold. I got out on the 2nd day, found the flash drive in my coat pocket once I reached my apartment. I think they planted it." "Why?" "To make me part of it," she said. "To make it look like I'd held on to it, that I'd collaborated. I was meant to panic, but I waited, and I came here." I took the bag, plugged it into the office laptop, and opened the contents. It was a video file. I played it, a grainy security feed. Trent and Thane, no sound, but clearly discussing something in a hallway. A handoff, a piece of paper, a nod. Then Thane turning away, while Trent slipped the document into his jacket. Time-stamped. Dated the day before Dunkirk pulled the plug. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, "but someone wanted me holding it. Framed or not, it clears me, or buries me." Wolfe watched the footage 3 times. Then he nodded. "This changes things," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, call Inspector Kramer." "That bad?" "That official," Wolfe replied. "This is no longer a private affair. This is criminal conspiracy, intimidation, and unlawful detainment. Kramer won't like being summoned." "He never does," Wolfe said, rising heavily from his chair. "But even he knows the scent of blood when it arrives in a silk envelope." It took 30 minutes for Kramer to arrive, 45 for him to stop cursing, and an hour for him to take the drive, the statements and the witnesses, and walk out of the brownstone grumbling about the paperwork, the press, and the peculiar pleasure of seeing a man like Trent rot in a holding cell. When the door closed behind him, the house felt quiet again. Not peaceful, but cleaner. Marcy remained seated. Wolfe finally looked at her. "You did not fold," he said. "That is rare." She met his gaze. "I wasn't alone." "No," Wolfe agreed, "and that is rarer still." She left soon after, coat wrapped tightly, chin high. When I came back in, Wolfe was alone with the beer again. "You were right," I said. "She wasn't dead." He nodded. "But she was supposed to be silenced." "She wasn't," Wolfe said, "because in the end, she remembered something." "What?" "That truth, while often dangerous, is rarely solitary. It leaves shadows, echoes. People." I leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "So who sent the flash drive?" Wolfe exhaled. "I do not know, and that bothers me." "You think it was insurance? Perhaps? Or conscience? Or a third player yet unseen? You want me to find them?" "No," he said. "Let them remain in shadow. For now, but keep your eyes open." I nodded. "Always." Dinner was served at 7. No one spoke during the first course, but as Fritz cleared the plates, Wolfe finally spoke. "Archie." "Yeah?" "I dislike deception, but I loathe poor craftsmanship more." Trent had both. Wolfe nodded once, lifted his wine, and toasted the empty chair across from him. "To justice," he said. And then, softly, like a man savoring a well-set trap, and to those who think the brownstone can be entered without consequence. Kramer didn't call the next morning. That, in itself, was news. Normally, when Wolfe hands him a wrapped package like the one we'd delivered, complete with testimony, timestamps, and enough circumstantial garnish to make a judge wince, Kramer calls to bark about the headlines or growl about the paperwork. Silence from Kramer usually means one of two things. Either the case had ballooned into something bigger than anticipated, or he was too busy milking it dry to come yell at Wolfe. Either way, Wolfe remained in his chair well past 10, pretending to read an Italian cookbook I was sure he'd memorized 5 years ago. I left him to it while I went over Claudine's final statement again, cross-checking her timeline with the logs from the flash drive. Something still rubbed wrong. The video showed Trent and Thane together the night before Dunkirk pulled out, but Thane's logs showed no active session that night, at least not under his own ID, which meant one of two things. Either he used a dummy login, a ghost shell Wolfe had mentioned during one of his less painful lectures on digital integrity, or someone had created one for him. Either way, the trail was too clean. And Trent? He'd all but folded the second Wolfe put the pressure on, but the truth is, he'd cracked too fast, like he was prepared to. I said as much to Wolfe just before lunch. He didn't respond right away, just turned a page he wasn't reading. Archie, why would a man like Jonas Trent, with ambition and polish, crumble under pressure when he had a chance to deny everything? Because the evidence was stacked. Stacked, Wolfe repeated. By us. Well, by Claudine, with a little help from Marcy's mystery flash drive, indeed. He set the book down. But what if the collapse was staged? Not by guilt, but by convenience? I frowned. You think he took the fall on purpose? Wolfe steepled his fingers. Perhaps not alone. But consider, he gave us nothing we didn't already have. The logs, the metadata, the motive, the timeline. What did he contribute? I thought about it. Only confirmation. Exactly. And that is what bothers me. He confirmed everything, without a fight. That is not a defense. That is a concession. Strategic. Measured. So he wanted to go down? Wolfe lifted one brow. He wanted someone to go down. I reached for the phone. Should I call Kramer? Tell him not to get too comfortable. No, Wolfe said. We must not interrupt. We must observe. He rose, heavy and slow, and stepped toward the orchids, trailing silence like steam. It was rare for Wolfe to leave the office before lunch. Rarer still for him to do so mid-thought. That meant he needed quiet. That meant he was calculating. I let him be. I spent the afternoon organizing files, placing a courtesy call to Claudine, who sounded rattled but steady, and drafting a summary of the entire mess, just in case Wolfe wanted it presented to the DA. He didn't ask for it, but I knew him well enough to know that didn't matter. It was around 4 when the real crack opened. The call came from Fritz, of all people. He rarely calls unless someone has died in the kitchen or requested a midweek veal reorder, but this time he sounded confused, then concerned. There is a man outside, Fritz said. He is not moving. He is watching the house. I went to the window above the stoop. There he was. Tall, trim, mid-40s. Not dressed like a thug. Dressed like someone who wanted to blend. Except he wasn't blending. He was waiting. Eyes on the front door, hands in coat pockets. The patience of a man on salary. I went to Wolfe. We've got company. He didn't turn. Describe. I did. He nodded. He's not a threat. He's a message. From whom? That, Wolfe said. We must find out. I stepped outside 10 minutes later with no coat, just to signal I wasn't there for a friendly chat. The man didn't flinch. Afternoon, I said. This isn't a train station. You waiting for someone? He looked at me with eyes that didn't blink enough. I have something for Mr. Wolfe. Does it involve another flash drive? Because we've started a collection. No, he said. This is personal. I didn't love that answer. Name? He didn't give one. Just handed me an envelope. For his eyes only. I took it, didn't open it, not there. Just nodded once and walked back up the steps, feeling the weight of the paper like it might be wired to buzz. Wolfe opened it in his chair with a small silver blade. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed, clean margins. I watched his eyes move line by line, then stop, then narrow, then close. He handed it to me without speaking. The note was unsigned, plain font, short. You remove the arm to save the hand. The root remains. Leave it be, or we'll come inside next time. I looked up. That's a threat. No, Wolfe said. That's a correction. You think Trent wasn't the main player? I think he was expendable, a barrier, a decoy, and the true architect does not like losing shadows. I whistled low. So what now? Wolfe stood again. 2 times in one day. Something was definitely brewing. We call Kramer, he said. We warn him that this case does not end in a cell. It ends in a deeper place. I picked up the phone, and after that, Wolfe turned back to the orchids. We wait, he said, but we never blink. The line to Kramer went through fast, which meant he was still in his office and not yet yelling at some rookie in a stairwell. I gave him the basics. Man outside the brownstone, anonymous note, the kind of phrasing that feels calm until you realize it isn't. I could hear him lighting a cigar as I talked, each puff sharp and close to the receiver. You're telling me someone sent a threat to Wolfe's doorstep after you wrapped the case? I'm telling you, I said, that the case wasn't wrapped. Trent took the fall, Thane's a passenger, but someone else, someone bigger, was driving. Kramer cursed, the kind of low hiss he saves for paperwork or surprises involving senators. You have a name? No, I said, but we have a tone, the kind that doesn't bluff. You still got that envelope? Wolfe's keeping it in the drawer. Good. Don't touch it. I'll send a man by. Just one? He grunted. You want a squad car on your stoop again? We still haven't recovered from the press mess after that city councilman's wife ran off with her yoga teacher. Fair enough, I said. But you might want to check Trent's holding status. If he's not talking, it's not because he's stubborn, it's because he's more scared of someone else. Wolfe thinks so? He's polishing the same sentence for the 4th time. That usually means yes. I'll handle it, Kramer said. Keep your heads down. I hung up and returned to the B-Direct office. Wolfe was still seated, still unmoving, still watching the orchids as if the curve of a petal might whisper a motive. Kramer's sending someone, I said. Also, he agrees. This thing isn't finished. Of course it isn't, Wolfe murmured. Nothing that involves silence and elegance ends on page 1. This is a chapter break, not a conclusion. And Trent? He's not talking, Wolfe said, because he was told not to, and because he thinks silence buys survival. I poured myself a glass of water, mostly to have something to do with my hands. You think the person behind all this, our mystery architect, is still inside the firm? No, Wolfe said. They've already moved on, but they've left residue. That man outside, he wasn't sent to scare us. He was sent to measure us. Measure us for what? For patience, Wolfe said. For tolerance, for whether we're the kind who stir water after the mud settles. I sat. So, what's our move? We create more water. That night I placed a call to Claudine. She answered after the 2nd ring, voice tight and flat, like sleep had been staying away lately. I need you to go back, I said. There was a pause. Then, why? Because whoever orchestrated this didn't stop at Trent. They're still watching, still working. We need to see where the pulse still beats. She was silent a long time. Then, "I'll go in tomorrow. I'll tail you from a distance, and we'll have Saul shadow the shadows." "Wolfe knows." He suggested the idea, in his own botanical way. She gave a breath that was almost a laugh. "You're not wrong about the pulse," she said. "There's something else. A new access code added to the network this week, and the name it's attached to doesn't exist in our records. You kept a copy. Of course. I'll bring it with me." The next morning, Claudine returned to the firm in a tan coat, hair tied back, posture normal, but there was a tension in her walk, like she was holding her breath in intervals. I trailed her from across the street in a delivery van Saul had borrowed for exactly this kind of low-profile tail work. Saul himself was 2 blocks east, planted near the building's parking garage, watching license plates like they were suspects. Inside, Claudine made it to her desk. Logged in. Nothing happened. For the first 30 minutes. Then, according to our timed sync, she got pinged by a direct message. Internal system. The sender name, L. Spencer. That name wasn't in their staff directory. It wasn't in any recent hiring logs either, but it was in the access list Claudine had flagged. The message read, "Back so soon? Brave or foolish?" She didn't respond, just printed a hard copy and sent me a text. "It's alive." We gave it another hour. No one approached her. No follow-up messages. No raised voices or whispering glances. Whoever it was, they wanted her to know they knew. Nothing more. A tap on the glass. Not a shatter. When she left, I followed her straight back to the brownstone. No detours. Saul reported no tails. No unfamiliar cars. Still, Wolfe had Fritz prepare the second parlor for conversation. Low light, locked door, and tea instead of wine. It was that kind of meeting. She handed Wolfe the printout. He read it twice, his mouth compressed slightly. "L. Spencer," he said. "I've searched every variant," Claudine said. "No match in personnel, no freelance consultants, no interns, no vendors." "So," Wolfe said, "a pseudonym, or a phantom profile," I added. "One built to observe, not act." "Precisely," Wolfe said, and it reacted only when Claudine returned. "Meaning it's real time. Watching. Selective." He leaned back and let out a long breath. "They didn't just frame Kinnell. They built a structure around it. A nest. Something with tendrils." "Wolfe," I said, "if the root's still inside the network, we will find it," he said, "but we will not touch it." "That's playing defense." "It's creating tension," he replied. "We let the ghost see its reflection. Then we watch what it does when it tries to shatter the mirror." Claudine looked pale but focused. "They're not just cleaning up," she said. "They're expanding. There are new systems being installed. New platforms. Someone is laying groundwork." "For what?" She shook her head. "I don't know yet. But it's not just sabotage anymore. It's construction." Wolfe tapped a finger on his armrest. "Then we let them build," he said. "And when the structure is complete," he opened his eyes and fixed them on me, "we collapse it." Wolfe didn't say another word that night. Not when Claudine left, coat tight around her and eyes sharper than I'd seen them. Not when Fritz brought in braised duck with artichoke hearts. Not even when I asked if he wanted the blinds drawn differently in the orchid rooms. He'd gone inward, deep, slow, deliberate, which in Wolfe terms meant something had shifted beneath the surface, and he was listening for the faintest ripple. I knew better than to press him when he was in that state. So I poured myself a drink and sat in the office with the lights low, rereading the note from L.S. Penso and watching the way its clipped tone hung in the air, even in print. It wasn't just surveillance. It was selection. Whoever this ghost was, they had reach. And restraint. That combination made my skin itch. The next morning started too quietly. Wolfe skipped breakfast. Fritz didn't mention it. Just left the tray untouched in the corner, like a priest placing a silent offering at an altar. I reviewed Claudine's notes, then rechecked the timestamps on the new network entries she'd brought us. 4 fresh access events under the L. Spencer ID, all within 60 seconds, all targeting file. Branches unrelated to Kinnell or Dunkirk. Unrelated. Until you followed the trail 2 levels deeper. That's when the old nerves kicked in. Because the system being pinged was a dormant compliance review archive from over a year ago, back when Dunkirk's portfolio had been initially routed through Marcy Bellwood. And deep in that tangle of fiscal cross-references and operational data sat a name I hadn't seen in a while. Hollis Baird. Baird was one of Dunkirk's earlier fixers. Quiet, private, clean-suited, and clean disappeared 6 months ago when the internal politics shifted and newer players started closing ranks. The rumor had been retirement, maybe health. But Claudine's archive logs showed that his digital credentials had been reactivated last week. I took the file into the office and placed it gently on Wolfe's desk. He was seated, but still half still, his hands laced, fingertips pulsing in that quiet rhythm he uses when irritation meets intrigue. I waited. 10 seconds. 15. He opened his eyes. Hollis Baird, I said. The name was enough. His fingers stopped, then separated, then moved toward the file. I watched him scan page by page. He didn't ask for clarification, didn't grunt, but I could tell the pattern was resolving. He was silenced, Wolfe said finally. Officially retired, but unofficially. Repositioned, he said. Removed from public influence, but retained in shadow capacity. You think he's L. Spencer? No, Wolfe said. I think he built it. I blinked. Come again? This pseudonym, this identity, it's too carefully constructed. It knows the corridors but avoids the doors. It reads intention, not just data. It's curated. He flipped the final page. And Baird was nothing if not a curator. We sat there a moment. You think he's still working for the firm? Number, I think he's working through it, like a hand inside a glove. The firm provides reach, but he supplies discretion. That's when the idea clicked. And Trent? Offered as a limb, Wolfe said. A necessary amputation. The moment Claudine and Marcy pushed too close, Baird gave up a piece of the machine. To protect the rest. To redefine it, Wolfe said. I stood, paced once. So what now? We can't go to Kramer with a ghost. No, Wolfe said, but we can let the ghost speak. He opened a fresh sheet of paper, dictated slowly. To L. Spencer. The stage is still set. The audience remains. Shall we begin Act 2? N.W. I typed it into a system-safe email, then let Claudine send it using her account, routed through a blind protocol Wolfe designed years ago for exactly this kind of invitation. We waited. 12 hours later, the response arrived. One line. Only if you're prepared to leave the theater with fewer actors. Wolfe read it once, then again, then smiled. Send a reply, he said. What? He tapped his glass for a refill. It is time, he said, to write the curtain. The next 48 hours blurred. Saul made calls. Fritz handled the foot traffic. Claudine supplied a decoy report designed to look like an internal breach summary, carefully worded, and even more carefully left in a digital folder Baird would find impossible to ignore. We leaked it just far enough to simulate a breach in containment, just enough to draw curiosity and maybe fear. And it worked. 2 nights later, while reviewing an idle log queue from a backup server, Claudine caught it, one deep access attempt to an off-network file storage device tied to Hollis Baird's old audit logs. The L_Spencer ID tripped it, Not to download, but to delete. He wasn't curious. He was cleaning. I flagged it and sent the trace. Saul had already guessed the IP route. An anonymous co-working suite in Lower Manhattan, rented weekly under a blind corporate shell. We got there first. I stayed outside while Saul went in, posing as a temp consultant. He saw the man once. Grey hair, lean frame, double monitors, surgical calm. The nameplate said, Lucas S. No one knew what he did, but they knew he never missed a Tuesday. We waited till Tuesday, and that's when Wolfe called Kramer. "I believe," he said over the line, "that you are owed a name." They picked him up at 4:06 p.m. No resistance, no words. Just a sigh, long and quiet, like someone finally letting go of an idea that had run its course. Hollis Baird, not L. Spencer, but the author of it. He didn't fight the charges, didn't name accomplices. But the systems he'd built, layered under shell IDs, cloaked in permissions, unraveled in court like old thread. Trent had been a pawn. Thane, a tool. The root wasn't a man, it was a method, a philosophy of quiet control. When it ended, Wolfe said nothing for 3 days. Then, one night, as I brought him a bottle of something Austrian and subtle, he looked up from the firelight and said, "Some men live by structure, but others, they live within it." I poured the wine. "And Baird?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed just enough to glint. "He built the structure to vanish inside." "And you pulled him out?" "No," Wolfe said. "We did." He toasted no one, drank once, and the brownstone finally exhaled. Kramer didn't thank Wolfe. He never does. What he did do was leave the brownstone with a folder of freshly typed statements, a full network trace, and a list of digital identities that had quietly shaped the economic bloodstream of 3 client empires over the last 18 months. He'd muttered something on his way out. Sounded like "damned orchid breeder." But his grip on the folder said what his mouth wouldn't. Wolfe had done it again. When the door closed, Wolfe didn't move. He sat in his chair, eyes half-lidded, fingers steepled against his stomach like the tension had evaporated into the varnished wood and starched curtains. I waited. Sometimes Wolfe likes the final act drawn out. Sometimes he ends it with silence, but this one had left too many bodies just shy of the stage. He spoke without looking at me. "The error was not in their ambition," he said, "but in their confidence. Trent and Thane, number Baird." He opened his eyes, slow and full. He believed that systems, once built, become self-sustaining. He forgot that all structures, no matter how secret, no matter how seamless, require maintenance, and that maintenance leaves fingerprints. He covered his tracks pretty well. "Almost," Wolfe said. But in the end, he touched one file too many. Claudine's audit was random, yes, but only in name. What she found was the signature of a man too precise to leave room for error and too proud to let go of the machine he created. And the others? Wolfe made a small, displeased noise. "Trent will recover. He was never a mastermind, merely a tactician with a narrow angle and a broader ego. Thane may face indictment, but he was an instrument, replaceable, forgettable. Claudine, however," he let the words drift for a moment. "She won't be," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "She saw what others missed not because she was smarter, but because she cared. She watched people, not just numbers. That made her dangerous and indispensable." He reached for the final page on his desk, an internal memo from the firm's board. Formal reinstatement of Gregory Kinnell, acknowledgement of sabotage, and the quiet removal of 2 board members for internal restructuring. Wolfe smiled faintly. Justice, when properly served, rarely makes headlines, but it leaves rooms. "Cleaner." I leaned back in my chair, hands behind my head. And Baird, he will vanish. Again. But not into code. This time into custody. You think he regrets it? Wolfe closed his eyes. Regret is for those who miscalculate. Baird didn't miscalculate. He merely underestimated the resilience of those he considered minor. I watched him for a moment, then stood and crossed to the bar to pour 2 fingers of rye. Wolfe wouldn't take it, but I needed something to wash down the aftertaste of too many lies. We almost missed it, I said. No, Wolfe replied without opening his eyes. You almost missed it. I merely waited for the noise to settle. I grinned. So it was all part of the plan? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Outside, the city was still moving. Firms were still closing deals. People still logged in under names they hadn't chosen. But inside the brownstone, the silence felt earned. Thick, finished. Dinner was served at 7. Fried brook trout with parsley butter, new potatoes, and string beans with shallots. Fritz outdid himself as usual. Wolfe lifted his fork once and said, Archie, if I ever again allow a man to sit in my chair uninvited, shoot him. You got it, I said, but you'll have to clean it up afterward. Don't do upholstery, Wolfe grunted. Outside, the wind turned, and inside, the house exhaled its last secret. For now. 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 For now.